Hello, this is episode 74 of Changing the Face of Yoga. And my guest is Dayna Hanlon-Pinkerton. And Dayna works with people in anxiety and depression. And she's extremely well thought of by her students. And she has a very interesting journey to talk about. So let's listen. I also have an opportunity for you. Harsha Yoga is offering an online course to teach you or expand your knowledge in the area of accessible yoga for pregnant women. And it is available now, and you can sign up at http://bit.ly/Harsha. And that's HERSHA, all caps. And if you put in this code when you are paying for the course, you will receive 15% off. So the code is CFOYHERSHA. Again, all caps. So that may be an opportunity for those of you that want to learn or to expand your knowledge about providing accessible yoga for pregnant women. Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. This is Changing the Face of Yoga, and I have a very interesting guest today. Her name is Dayna Hanlon-Pinkerton, and Dayna has been practicing yoga for 2 decades, and she is a certified member of International Association of Yoga Therapists, and she loves to bring the teachings of yoga to her students and private clients. And her particular area of focus is working with those who suffer from depression, anxiety, and trauma. And she has a background in experiential education. And Dayna lives in York, Pennsylvania in the U.S., but recently got to travel to York, England in the U.K. So she's sounds very excited about that. I have a little exclamation mark here. So, welcome.
Yeah, that was exciting.
Welcome, Dayna.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I guess I will just elaborate a little bit on the experiential education piece. So for the past 15 years, I have, in addition to having my own practice and venturing into the world of teaching yoga and yoga therapy, I have been a home educator to my daughters. And so I really feel like that experience laid such a nice foundation for working with others, in the sense that when you're working with someone and guiding their education, it's very individual, and that's very similar to what happens in a yoga therapy session.
Okay. Yes. And that segues nicely into what I wanted to talk about. You have a website, and you had a little section on testimonials. And I was extremely impressed by them because, so many testimonials are, oh, she's great, she's wonderful, yeah. Yours were really thoughtful ones, and they said that there was some themes there that came out, and I'd just like to talk about how you bring that atmosphere to your class, because there were certain things that they all talked about intuition and really meeting the individual's needs, and that things were calmer and you had a more consistent focus, and that you gave them the perfect amount of challenge. I think that's an absolutely wonderful statement. So what's your philosophy when you start a class or start a session with a yoga therapy client? What exactly is how you feel the energy or feel the need in the room?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's just so vital to tune into that. And so I honestly, I don't often go to a class with a super worked up plan. I mean, I have some nuggets in mind, but I think that it's always my intention to just see what's before me and to trust that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that piece, those things kind of blend nicely in the sense that creating the ground, and especially in a class situation, like helping people to just right away move from wherever they've been in the day, or whatever busy morning they've had, if it's a morning class. And we tend to have hectic lives, right? And so in that moment of just, okay, now you're here, you landed on the mat, and it's time to shift that gear. And so starting with that piece of just getting people really anchored in that, I think helps to open some things up. So once there's that established sense of I'm here, I'm present, and wherever we go next on the journey is what was meant to be for the day. And so maybe that's how that blending of intuition comes, and just meeting what I see and playing with it, having fun with that.
Oh, great. Explore that a little bit more. How do you have fun with it? I mean, sometimes yoga classes can seem so very, very serious,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Very, very.
It's true. And even in that, I actually address that head on sometimes, like when I'm getting all these very serious faces looking back at me in tree pose, it's a little daunting, right? Like, what's so serious about trying to balance, friends? But it's true. I think maybe that sort of does speak a little bit to how up in our heads we can get, and how just even fun of creating a shape with our body can become this sort of thing that we're thinking about, or maybe just it's the focus that's involved, and that can be serious too. And so I think really it's a blend of that, like how do we have fun with that seriousness, which seems like two sort of oppositional things, but ultimately that's a lot about where we're going, right? Like how do we hold these opposites? How do we hold them as things that can exist simultaneously? And it's really cool when that can happen in a class or in a private session.
Yeah. Because it is almost stress-inducing, isn't it, to actually have to hold seriousness and playfulness at the same time doing this.
Go ahead. I guess you're right. I guess it can be sort of stress-inducing to hold those things, especially if it's not our practice. So we, in addition to kind of be, as we're living these busy lives, we also, I think, there's a lot of conditioning around being in a particular camp. And so when you're asked to sort of look at, well, how do we hold these two? How do we hold seriousness and fun in the same place? That sort of opens up a whole new inquiry, a whole new place of curiosity, and maybe a little softening around a certain structure or a certain construct or a certain belief that we need to be so anchored in one particular camp or another.
Beautiful thought. Very nice. Especially, I am an American. I live in Australia, but I am a U.S. citizen.
Oh, okay.
The politics over there seem very difficult, shall we say, at the time.
Difficult is a great word.
There, because we don't really know politics, but I would
sure
there's just a lot, some stress being generated from the kinds of things that are being said and done over there right now.
Mm-hmm,
and I think, and it does seem like there's been a lot of hardening, shall we say, of political ideas. So this is really helpful, I would think, to say, yes, you can believe something, but you can also accept the other side. And so I think that's really, really an interesting way to look at it, that holding two opposite thoughts in one and letting both of them have some sway.
Yeah. And just even to percolate a little, I mean, I get that that's not something that is like easily, like you can change your mind right away, or like you should even change your mind right away. But just that little opening of, how, can I hold a little bit of space for that? Can I explore something that may feel like a challenging or stress-inducing belief, and in that softening, then not be so rigid. And truly that is the path, right? So we come to these classes, or we come to a session, and there's a particular thing, but then ultimately I feel like as a yoga therapist and as a teacher, really I'm hoping that folks are taking that off of the mat. They're taking it beyond that stressful tree pose, and they are applying it to their political views or their relationship with their family and their friends and their coworkers and all of those other places.
Yeah. So I think you said at one point that you were giving them tools to help them. And this is probably a really important tool that can be given out to or used in the rest of their life. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. I don't think it's an overnight thing. I think it would be something you would have to really accept for a long time, perhaps. But I just think it's a really interesting idea. And I actually haven't thought about it as being part of yoga, but it is a way to soften and expand our consciousness, isn't it, in a way?
Truly. And I think, Stephanie, one of the great practices for that is just getting real in the practice of pranayama. And so breath is a great entry. And so guiding folks in that exploration of just paying attention to the breath and noticing that end of when we're full of the inhalation, and then when we're empty of the exhalation, and just feeling that and sensing that in a very visceral, grounded place of the body. And then there starts to be that connection. So we sort of started out talking about something that feels what for some might be kind of either weird or lofty or unusual. But then it's very tangible when you can bring it back in and say, oh, at the top of that inhalation is a fullness. And then at the bottom of that exhalation is an emptiness, and my own body is capable and available to that oppositional place. But then we get to see all the nuances in between. And so that's sort of in the journey of the subtle body, and how the body can then take us through that, or what we learn from exploring some of that a little bit more. And so I think that's a way to kind of make it more tangible, to get it sort of out of the cognitive processing and get it into a space that's like, oh, I feel that fullness, and I feel that emptiness, and how two sides of an extreme really ultimately are kind of the same.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, though, that it is a bit esoteric. And if you have a really concrete experience that can give them, that adds to the experience, that adds to your knowledge. I think that's a great point. That, yeah. Mm-hmm. As yogis, we can talk about this all day, but that doesn't mean
yeah, totally
goes out into the world very well. So
yeah, right. So how does it transfer? And I guess ultimately what I'm saying there then is that in the practice itself, in that practice of just the simple practice of breathing, which we're doing all the time, but then tuning into that becomes the portal, right? That becomes the way of, like you just said, having a very concrete experience with it.
Yeah.
And then practice, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen the first time. Never.
Right.
Or if it does, it's so surprising you forget how to do it.
Yeah.
You were talking about some offering that you were making, and you talked about it was deliciousness, which I love that term, and contentment, but that it was also going to provide way clearing, and that's WAY clearing. And I was wondering, what did you mean by that? Do you remember?
Yeah. Actually, I do. This what you're referring to actually is something that's coming up this weekend. Yeah, so there's a festival that's happening in Maryland, which, as you mentioned, I'm in York, Pennsylvania, so Maryland is really, really close to us. The Love Light Festival. And so I'll be there offering some short private sessions. And these were titles for the sessions. So the way clearing is a little bit of a longer session, and it's kind of an opportunity to really harness all of that energy of being in a yoga festival environment and being able to practice with many different teachers, and then perhaps be in a position to kind of get out of the way. That's really what I intend by that. Like, how do we sort of get our stuff out of the way, the stuff that kind of keeps us attached or keeps us feeling limited, or it gets in our way, right? So how do we kind of explore that? So that's what that was the title for that session.
I see.
It's the change of seasons here this coming weekend. So we'll be entering the autumnal equinox. And so with all of that sort of shifting energy, it's, it feels that the time is always ripe, right, to kind of harness that.
Mm. I noticed that you said you got your inspiration from many things, but one of it was nature. And this is an example of it, I think, where the seasons are shifting, and as a result, our energies are shifting. So do you develop themes for your classes and your clients based on the nature of what's happening in nature?
Mm-hmm. I feel like I always do try to be mindful of where we are in certain cycles of nature, and if it seems appropriate to connect that into what's happening in a client's life at a particular time. It's a little easier in a class situation because we can easily just explore what's going on in nature in that way, and then if it happens to be a connector, then that's awesome. But yeah, I think that it's, we're surrounded by the change of nature all the time. And so it's just such a nice reminder that even as we can get sort of mired in our anxiety or our low points, if we just look outside, there's reflection, right? Like, we've just had some crazy storms here. And so there's a temperamentality in that, right? And I think in some ways it can be a little comforting. That there's something natural about it. Like, there's something not so strange about feeling down sometimes.
You say that your area that you like to work in is depression and anxiety and trauma. We've had a lot of podcasts about trauma, but not as many about depression and anxiety. And as I said, I was reading your testimonials, and one person said that your classes had helped them decrease the amount of self-harm that they were involved in. And so these sound pretty, I mean, we all get a little depressed sometime, and we all get a little anxious sometime, but these sound like they may be a bit more intense or even maybe destructive. So how did you get into this particular area?
Yeah, I think that maybe that's unfolded in a couple of different ways, but certainly just my own awareness of yoga being that the seat of healing really is in the mind. And so that to be able to kind of go directly there, for me, feels like a great way to explore. And so actually I just offered a workshop recently on the koshas, and we kind of combined that with a map of the gunas. And I think that is a really nice way to kind of create a measure. And so, like you just said, that all of us get a little down, and of course we have that other experience of being really uplifted. And as we balance our systems, or as we, for some folks, get a little mired in one extreme or another, I think that the gunas can be a nice way to look at how to find that balance. It's a really applicable tool. It's a really nice way to just say, how long have I been in this space of feeling really rajasic and overworked or overstimulated, and then it kind of gives a nice segue into breaking that down, like what else is going on, how am I eating, how am I sleeping, and then it becomes those tangible things of what of that can sort of be shifted a little bit to support that decrease of a high overworked kind of system, or to support the other end, bringing the energy up a little bit.
Okay. I don't know that I have a really big listenership of students, yoga students, but could you just give a really quick overview of the Gunas, so that I'm sure the teachers know, but if I have students, they may
sure.
What the heck are they talking about?
What's the Gunas?
Yeah, that doesn't sound good. No.
Good Guna. Yeah. So the Gunas just it's really, these are three qualities. And so we have, these are three qualities that exist in nature. And they're very much on that similar paradigm of extremes. So one end we have Rajas, and Rajas is an energy and passion and kind of the heightened end of our feelings or our emotions. It could be agitation or excitement. And in some ways we can also see, like, well, how can we use that to fuel us, right? So I'm not talking about these as necessarily good or bad, but just the qualities themselves. So then on the other end, we have tamas, and tamas is the opposite, which is darkness, ignorance, inertia, sort of the blah end of the extreme. And then in the middle, we have purity and light and harmony and balance. And so, yeah, that's how we define the Gunas.
Okay. And so you can see that it's like a teeter-totter.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, where, the lethargic side can come up or the rajic side can come up. But what you really want to do is be in the middle and keep that teeter-totter really steady. And I think that's a great way to think about it, because we do go to those extremes. Everybody does, but it's coming back to the middle. And that's where I think yoga is really, really helpful. Well, first of all, it names these things, which I think is helpful, instead of just feeling it, to have a name and say, oh, okay, I understand what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you added that. The naming is super helpful. It gives us something then to talk about, and a way to kind of define and observe and work with.
Well, this has been a great podcast. I want to give you an opportunity to add anything that you would like to, or expand on something that we've talked about that you think you'd really like to share with the listeners.
Well, I think that we've covered it, Stephanie. I think it's just been so nice to talk to you, and nice to have this conversation, and to really, to just look at yoga in a bigger scope. I think, I guess for so long there's been such a focus on the physical, and so when we can bring all of these pieces together, I think we're really giving it a nice way of looking at the whole picture. And I think that your podcast, Changing the Face of Yoga, really explores and embodies that.
Oh, thank you. That is the purpose. And I love talking to you all, because you're really living that. You're really teaching that it is, yes, asanas are lovely, movement's important, but there's so much more to yoga than that. And we'll get there sooner or later.
Yeah, right. Practice. Got it. Back to that. Circle back around.
Okay, I want to give your contacts in case people want to look into what you're doing. And her website is Dayna, Dayna, Pinkerton.org. And she's LinkedIn as Dayna Pinkerton C IAYT. Pinterest, Dayna Pinkerton, and Facebook, Dayna Hanlon-Pinkerton. So you can see what Dayna is doing. She's doing lots of great things according to the testimonial of her students. And my gosh, what else can any of us want but that? So Dayna, it's been fun. It's been a great talk. I like how, like I said, I think you must call up or do something that makes a wonderful ambience in your classes, because you could really feel it from those testimonials that people were feeling like
Thank
really
you.
met their needs. And that's just, that's what we do, isn't it?
Yeah, truly.
Okay.
Help them to see themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, isn't it? We're kind of like a mirror, and just reflecting back on them. Okay, well, thank you so much, Dayna. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
I'm glad we got to talk.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to talk to you, Stephanie. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.